A Crusader sword dredged up from the sea, a 12,000-year-old temple, and more are going to be discussed in this week's edition of Really Old News, covering the week of Sunday, October 17th to Saturday, October 23rd. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Last Sunday, a sword once wielded by a crusading knight was discovered off the Carmel coast of northern Israel near the town of Atlit by amateur scuba diver Shlomi Katzen. Luckily, the diver reported this spectacular find to a local antiquities inspector. Its iron blade, encased with a thick concretion of stones, shells, and other marine life, is 3 feet long, and its hilt is another foot in length. The blade is thought to be well preserved under its crusty shell by the steady temperature of the Mediterranean's waters. So, how did this sword even get down there? Well, there are many natural coves along the Carmel coast which have provided good shelter from storms to merchant vessels throughout history. As such, the sword may have fallen off one. Maybe a knight was resting on the side of the ship and it slipped out of his hands. I don't know. But I imagine losing it would be akin to losing your phone, although, of course, one is much more helpful in battle than the other. Said unlucky knight may have been connected to Atlit's citadel, the Chateau Pèlerin, according to an interview with Jacob Sharvit of the Israel Antiquities Authority. Also referred to as Atlit Castle, construction on it was begun in 1218 by the Knights Templar during the Fifth Crusade. This castle was built to replace another nearby castle named Le Destroy. Chateau Pèlerin dominated the coast and could support 4,000 people in siege conditions, but luckily for it, it was never taken in siege. But of course, the Crusaders couldn't hold on to it forever, and in August 1291 they abandoned it shortly after the fall of Acre. Atlit also happens to harbor a submerged Neolithic site off its coast. The sword will be held in the conservation lab of the Israel Antiquities Authority to be cleaned and is bound to be put on public display afterwards. Coincidentally, our next story deals with yet another important discovery made in northern Israel that also sheds new light on the Crusades. Working ahead of a road construction project, researchers from the Israel Antiquities Authority discovered the first ever Crusader encampment to be discovered in the country at Tzipori Springs in Galilee. The site is thought to have been occupied by Crusaders for 2 months prior to the Battle of Hattin in 1187, a disastrous defeat for the Crusaders which led to Saladin conquering Jerusalem. Hundreds of metal artifacts were found in different clusters across the site, which mirrors the fact that different groups of knights had their own little camps. The majority of these metal artifacts were horseshoe nails, which suggests that the main activity in this camp was probably changing those nails. Interestingly enough, the horseshoe nails and other bits of material culture were more prevalent closer to the springs, which give the locale its name. This implies that the people of high status, the big shots of the Crusader camp, probably encamped closer to the springs and let all the peasants go thirsty elsewhere. Very few remnants of other activities besides changing horseshoe nails have actually survived, however, because it's likely that the objects used in relation to them were taken back to the castles and cities the Crusaders came from after the camp was packed up. In general, the fact that this is the first Crusader camp to have been found in Israel fits the trend of moments of transition like battles and encampments, leaving hardly any trace in the archaeological record. Our third and final story covers the discovery of a temple thought to be 12,000 years old, unearthed in southeast Turkey. Specifically, it was uncovered at the site of Bonkuklu Tarla in Mardin province. This year saw the fourth season of excavations at the site, which unearthed private buildings, public buildings, 130 skeletons, and over 100,000 beads found in the graves of said skeletons across various layers of the site. All that ancient bling is pretty impressive, but the most significant discovery at the site made this year is a temple estimated to be 12,000 years old, i.e., in the Neolithic. Bonkuklu Tarla mound, in which it was found, dates to the pre-pottery Neolithic and encompasses all phases of that period. Work was concentrated on the southeast portion of the mound this season, and as a result, two buildings were found, the temple being one of them. It's thought to be a temple because of its architecture and the finds unearthed within it. Stelae similar to those found in Göbekli Tepe, hearths and altars were found within it, and the heads of bulls were even found intentionally left in some of the altars. In general, it shares many features with the famous site of Göbekli Tepe, so maybe that famous site now has a rival in being the oldest temple on the planet. Now that wraps up this edition of Really Old News. Thank you for watching, and make sure to not miss out on next week's edition.